Who are the Watchers anyway? I've mentioned the Watchers from time to time in this series on 1st Enoch, but I felt like today it would be good to take a little diversion and look at them in a little more detail. Briefly, but they're important enough so that they merit this kind of attention. The Watchers are senior level angels, angels that have a lot of very particular and important knowledge, angels that have a lot of power, and angels that were willing to do the unthinkable, which is to rebel against God. Now, in the book of Daniel, we first see the Watchers making an appearance in the Bible. It is really the place to look if you want to see who are the Watchers and where did they start. In Daniel, the Watchers, again, are very obviously angelic beings that are being given a very, very important job to do. This again reinforces the fact that they are very senior level and very important in this story in Daniel. Daniel chapter 4. I'm going to read a few excerpts. Daniel 4 verses 13 through 24. And Nebuchadnezzar is having another dream. If you'll remember the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar has dreams, visions, and he then wants to find somebody that can interpret them. Of course, the only one who can do this is Daniel. After all of his astrologers and, sorcerers and exorcists and everything else couldn't do anything except say, tell us the dream and then we'll tell you what it means. So Nebuchadnezzar is recounting some of the dream, and I'm going to be excerpting here for the sake of time. He says, I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. And the watcher proclaimed aloud and said, and then he starts giving Nebuchadnezzar this dream. So Nebuchadnezzar is in bed, and suddenly a holy one, a watcher, a very particular type of angel, comes to him with a very important message that he gives to him in the form of a dream. God does not send just anyone to speak with a king and give him a dream that's going to foretell the future of the king, his kingdom, and more besides. These are very carefully selected beings that are sent, and that is who this watcher is. Then after he goes on and explains the dream, he says, the sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decisions by the word of the holy ones, that is to say, the holy angels, the angelic beings, supernatural senior level personages, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will and sets over it the lowliest of men. And then the dream continues. Now, Daniel is speaking to the king now, and he's giving an interpretation of the dream. And Daniel then winds up his interpretation of the dream by saying these words. Because the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, let the dew of heaven pass over him till 7 periods of time. This is the interpretation, O king. It is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king. Now, Daniel is saying that the decree comes from the Most High, but the narrative part talks about the watchers and says, this sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones. So what we see here is that the watchers are part of the bigger picture in both delivering the word of the Lord, if you will, and enforcing this decree. This decree is the decree of the watchers, and it is the decision by the word of the holy ones. Even though in Daniel's words, it's a decree of the Most High. So anytime you see somebody speaking for God, you know that they are very important, as it were, prophesying in the name of God. Here, we have the watchers, which are senior level angels, delivering a decree and a message that comes from God Most High to a king. Again, God is not going to send just anyone to speak to a king and basically tell him, your future is in the hands of God, and here's what's going to happen to you, king. And the king was very, very receptive to all of this. So this is the background in Daniel. In Daniel, the watchers are very special, very select group, very senior. They don't just go and do willy-nilly this and that. They are specially selected and specially given things to do by Almighty God, the Most High God, the Lord of hosts. And when you see this phrase, the Lord of hosts, it means the Lord who is in charge of and exercises complete authority over all heavenly beings in the heavenly realms. Everything is under the control of God Most High, the Lord of hosts. Hosts being an old word for many, many, or huge crowds, huge numbers. So in the book of Watchers, we see that the Watchers were entrusted with very, very important information. They are entrusted with huge amount of power and authority, and they defected from their place of privilege and the place which they had been assigned by God. And they went down and they did two things which were unthinkable. One is they assumed human form, which we know they can do. Read your Old Testament. There are episodes where angels come and they appear to people in human form, which is not able to be distinguished unless they do something exceptional. So the angels came, these watchers, and they assumed human form. They married women, had children, and as it were, broke the dividing line between the heavenly and the earthly, between the supernatural and the natural, between those who were created to be spiritual beings forever, assisting God and being delegated authority by God, and the men who were created by God. This was unthinkable. The other thing which they did is something we'll cover shortly in our video series, is they delivered to humanity in a very relatively short period of time, they delivered secret knowledge, which men may have discovered over time eventually, but they came down and just released all of this information to humanity in a very short time. Two of the most important things being the secrets of astrology, the secrets of how to do divination by means of the stars, and metallurgy, how to find, mine, and produce metals from the earth and how to forge them into weapons so that you now have warfare, which now is just like taken to another level because now people have the ability to do metallurgy. They have the ability to make weapons and all sorts of other things that are going to produce a technological leap in the history of humanity. And this is very, very serious stuff. God was completely like, this cannot happen and they will be punished. Their punishment is going to be gone into shortly in our book, in our video series. So in Enoch, the watchers in the early chapters are portrayed as being the ones that had departed from the will of God. There are other watchers that are seen in other parts of Enoch, which remain in the service of God. But in the book of Watchers, most of the watchers that you see are the ones who did evil, who departed from the ways of the Lord and came down and brought untold trouble. They're in supernatural, they're anointed, they have knowledge, and they came down and made a total mess out of things on the earth. And as we will see, this is the reason for the flood. The flood was not in the strictest sense just because of the fall and resulting wickedness of man. That's part of it, but the rest of it is the actions of the watchers to release this huge evil on the earth. And we'll see that shortly in our video series. Now I'm going to end with an example from contemporary life, which I think will bring this into focus a little clearer. Imagine, and I'm sitting here in Florida, in the United States, imagine if a group of United States senators, military generals, senior intelligence officials, and cabinet level officials got together and decided to rebel against the government of the United States. That would be unthinkable. Maybe one, maybe two at a stretch. But imagine if 10 or 20 of them got together and said, we're done with doing our job. We're going to do something different. It would be an unthinkable act of violence against the government, if you will. This is what we're looking at here in 1 Enoch. We're seeing very senior, very responsible, very trusted angels gathering together, binding themselves with an oath and saying, we're going to do this thing. We're going to do it. And if we go down, we're going to go down together. And 200 came down. And what we'll see shortly in Enoch, we can see echoes of it in Genesis chapter 6. So as we go through the book of the Watchers, first section of 1 Enoch, just remember, Watchers showed up earlier in Daniel. They're obviously very senior. It said, this is the decree of the Watchers. This is the word that comes from the holy ones. These are not just any angels. These are very, very senior angels. And in the book of Enoch, in the book of Watchers, we see the havoc that they will bring to the earth in a very short time. We're very glad that you're joining us for this series. I think it's going to be very fascinating to see where things go from here, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. God bless you.